So what is environmental citizenship? Well, for starters, it assumes that since we're all part of our ecosystem and that our future depends on how we care for our planet, that all individuals are responsible for protecting the environment, not just our government or corporations. Given the importance of both natural beauty and natural resource extraction to Wyoming, we have a great stake in what environmental citizenship could mean. Wyoming Signatures' Jeff Lockwood and his guest political science professor Teena Gabrielson go into more detail.
Does this mean that I'm a bad citizen if I don't drive a hybrid, or where does citizenship begin and this individual liberty thing end?
I think that's a good question, a good place to start. Environmental citizenship, green citizenship, ecological citizenship, I think you can use any of those terms, is an idea that as citizens we have obligations that extend beyond the strictly political. If you think about citizenship as being an equal member in a collective that is you are in that collective empowered with decision making for the good of that collective, then we can think about the environment certainly as a common good that we should think about in the ways we act. So some folks think of environmental citizenship as a sort of set of actions that you could begin with most easily as reduce, reuse, recycle.
Mm-hmm.
I think buying hybrid is great, but that might go a little far outside of most people's financial responsibility. And so thinking about green citizenship, we can start with that understanding. But I would say that that's somewhat limited in two ways. If we're thinking, I think it's good. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. Right. I want people to recycle. Mm-hmm. I want people to reduce their consumption. I'm hoping that we can convince people to reuse before they recycle. All of mm-hmm. those things, switch the light bulbs, mm-hmm. Turn down the heat, think about energy efficiency, weatherize, all those things.
Right. But that's not enough.
But that's not, well, I just want to say—
Or it's a different kind of thing.
I think there are problems in thinking of citizenship in that way,
okay.
Strictly. That is, it's a very individualized set of actions,
right.
rather than thinking about the ways in which we can work together collectively to deal with bigger structural issues. While all of those issues are important and they empower people to act in their everyday life, I think that we miss some of the more structural features of our economy and our consumption, our production, if we focus solely on those. The other aspect that I would say in which that is narrow is thinking of the environment solely as sort of pristine nature, mm-hmm. or the environment out there. So
parks and green spaces and all of that.
Green space and all of that, which is absolutely, definitely something we want to preserve and protect and give more people access to, mm-hmm. particularly in urban areas. But we can't help but interact with our environment, whether we live in rural areas, suburban areas, exurban areas, wherever we are, we're interacting with our environment. And so I think that concept needs to be broadened so that we can talk about things like children's asthma as
so this would include things like indoor environments,
yes.
right? So when we think of environmental citizenship, we don't think of, I mean, one of the big accomplishments, now this goes back a few years, of course, mm-hmm. was the elimination of lead-based paint, right? Right. So, but that, of course, we weren't painting trees, right? We were painting, the inside of houses. Right. So that would be a kind of environmental citizen, a responsible use for collective communal good.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it would involve more spaces, more people, and it would expand our notion of ideal human, non-human natural world relations, I think, in ways that would be positive, to move away from a strictly environmentalist
right.
pristine wilderness national parks conception.
I know another area that you're quite interested in is environmental justice. And one way of understanding environmental justice is how we go about allocating the bad stuff, right? Yeah. And this sort of all emerged, I think, in the 60s with sort of urban poor black populations getting stuck with toxic waste. But how about Wyomingites? Do we have environmental justice issues here?
The first thing I think I'd want to say to that is definitely we have environmental justice issues in Wyoming. The Wind River Alliance is doing work on uranium processing and water quality with the Northern Arapaho, for instance, and that's clearly an environmental justice issue. But another thing I think I'd like to add to that, in thinking about environmental justice, I think it's become commonplace to think of it as a distributional inequity. That is, justice strictly as a fair distribution.
Who gets the bad stuff, or the good stuff, I suppose.
Or the good stuff, hopefully. But I think that more recent work in environmental justice is moving beyond that and thinking really about justice as participation.
Sort of a procedure rather than an outcome
Absolutely,
approach to it.
right? Decision-making structures need to be fair, they need to be transparent, they need to be democratic when we make decisions about both environmental harms or potential environmental harms and potential environmental goods. But it also is about questions of recognition. That is, no one wants to be considered a second-class citizen.
Right.
And if you broaden the scale from looking just at Wyoming to looking at the nation or looking globally, what you most definitely see is a strong correlation between environmental harms or inequities and race, ethnicity, low sociostatus income. And so we don't want to lose that link by thinking, one of the things thinking about environmental justice in Wyoming does open up is how increasingly all of us are exposed to environmental degradation, toxins, et cetera, and we can think more broadly then about those who are most likely to be vulnerable, the elderly, children, women.
So it's as much a question of perhaps power as it is a question about pollution. So one of the big concerns in Wyoming is certainly how we distribute the pollution, the consequences of an energy industry. But I'm also interested in the fact that we're a beautiful state. Should we attend to how we give access or provide access to our environmental assets as well?
Absolutely. I think we definitely want to pay attention to how green space is distributed, especially in built environments and urban areas where we have more control over that. In other areas, heat vulnerabilities are issues. But there's a certain extent to which we can't have accessibility to all spaces. Remote Yellowstone is remote Yellowstone, and it should remain wild.
And what I'm getting, which is kind of exciting, is it's not just about how it comes out, but it's how we go about making that decision. And the justice might be built into a democratic process rather than a particular outcome.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for being with me today. I really appreciate your time and your insights.
Thank you.